I'm recommending to you that you receive Pastor Torrey and Pastor Sarah.
A shocking storm is brewing at the intersection of faith and fame. Bishop T.D. Jakes, one of the most powerful and influential voices in modern ministry, has suddenly stepped down, and the timing couldn't be more suspicious. Just as Sean Diddy Combs faces explosive legal battles, whispers are growing louder about a scandalous FreakOFF tape allegedly linked to Jakes himself. So, could this be more than a coincidence? Is the beloved preacher hiding something far darker than anyone imagined? Buckle up, because this story goes far beyond the pulpit. The fall of Bishop T.D. Jakes and the Diddy connection. But just when it seemed the dust couldn't rise any higher, a deeper and more disturbing layer of the story began to unravel, one that tied T.D. Jakes to music mogul Sean Diddy Combs in ways few could have imagined. It all began on March 25, 2024, when record producer Rodney Lil Rod Jones filed a bombshell lawsuit accusing Diddy of a string of horrifying offenses. While the suit mostly centered around Diddy's alleged misconduct, a shocking detail buried on page 47 caught everyone off guard. The claim that Diddy had intended to use his ties with Bishop T.D. Jakes to fix his crumbling public image, following abuse accusations from his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. Although the lawsuit didn't fully explain how Jakes would help Diddy regain favor with the public, it was enough to stir up wild speculation. The church world, already rattled by the headlines, was now forced to reckon with the idea that one of its most prominent leaders might have been entangled in a PR scheme for one of the entertainment industry's most controversial figures. Jakes and Diddy weren't strangers. Their professional paths had crossed before. Jakes had broadcast his Kingdom Culture sermons on Revolt TV, a media platform co-founded by Diddy, back in 2021. A year later, Jakes was seen celebrating at Diddy's lavish birthday party. These past interactions, once seen as harmless networking, were now being re-examined with suspicion. Could their relationship have been deeper than anyone knew? And was Diddy counting on Jakes' religious credibility to wipe his slate clean? The timing of these revelations couldn't have been worse. By late 2023, whispers on social media turned into a roar. Unverified claims circulated that Jakes had been spotted at secretive FreakOFF parties hosted by Diddy. Exclusive, invite-only events that were rumored to involve disturbing behavior. Though no hard evidence surfaced, the accusations alone were enough to rattle the foundation of Jakes' reputation. The pastor remained silent as the rumors intensified, which only deepened public curiosity and concern. Then, on April 15, 2024, during a Sunday sermon broadcast to millions, Jakes broke his silence. His voice trembled with emotion as he condemned the accusations as false and malicious. He declared them an attack on his ministry and personal integrity. Just 3 days later, on April 18th, he took legal action, filing a $100 million defamation lawsuit against Lil Rod, denouncing the claims as fabricated and career-damaging. His legal team then expanded their response. On May 2nd, Jakes filed multiple suits against YouTube creators who had circulated the rumors, demanding $50 million from each and urging the platform to expose the anonymous individuals behind them. According to Jakes, many of the videos were AI-generated to deliberately smear his name. Determined to prove he had nothing to hide, Jakes formed an independent oversight board made up of faith leaders and legal experts, granting them unrestricted access to both his personal records and the church's internal files. He even underwent and passed a polygraph test, releasing the results publicly on July 15th. To further demonstrate transparency, He opened the Potter's house's finances to public scrutiny and enforced new policies, like mandatory annual background checks for senior church officials. But the tension reached a breaking point on November 24, 2024, the 80th anniversary of the Potter's house. During his sermon titled Strength and Weakness, Jakes collapsed mid-sentence at exactly 10:37 a.m., stunning a congregation of 12,000 in person and more than 2.3 million watching online. His body trembled, his eyes rolled back, and he struggled to breathe. Panic swept the sanctuary. 3 elderly congregants fainted. A doctor in the front row, Dr. Mariah Stevenson, rushed to his side. The emergency plan, codenamed Shepherd's Staff, was activated immediately. The crowd was cleared within minutes. An usher retrieved a defibrillator while paramedics arrived, stabilizing Jakes and preparing him for airlift. Thanks to a newly installed helipad, a helicopter reached him within minutes and transported him to Methodist Dallas Medical Center. There, he underwent 9 grueling hours of surgery, received 47 units of blood, and endured 3 additional procedures. He remained in intensive care for 17 days, surrounded by a specialized team of nurses. On December 18th, just under a month later, Jakes made his first public appearance via video call. Despite his frail condition, his brief message raised over $4 million for the hospital's cardiac unit. His recovery journey included cutting-edge oxygen therapy, a strict nutritional plan, and hours of daily physical rehab. Yet despite this visible suffering and unprecedented openness, doubts linger. Skeptics continue to whisper, was the dramatic collapse a divine trial, or a carefully staged performance to draw attention away from looming legal dangers and the whispers of a leaked FreakOFF tape? If Bishop Jakes truly stands against the darkness, why was he anywhere near it to begin with? Stay with us as we dive deeper into this explosive revelation. Jakes suing for defamation. As questions surrounding Bishop T.D. Jakes' connection to Diddy's legal troubles gained momentum, new and even darker claims began to surface, adding a disturbing layer to an already tangled controversy. Federal investigators had started pulling threads from private lawsuits, trying to uncover if deeper crimes like trafficking, drug offenses, or weapons violations were hiding beneath the surface of celebrity drama. Former federal prosecutor Lori Levinson confirmed the seriousness of the probe, saying cases like this don't attract national resources unless there's more than meets the eye. It was no longer just about reputation, it was potentially a federal matter. On November 25, 2024, just days after the chaotic collapse during his anniversary sermon, Bishop Jakes filed yet another lawsuit. This time, the target wasn't a media outlet or music producer, but a fellow pastor. Dwayne Youngblood, a once quiet voice in the ministry world, had stepped forward with allegations that shocked even Jakes' most skeptical critics. According to Youngblood, the bishop had attempted to sexually assault him during a church visit when he was just 18. What made the claim impossible to dismiss was Youngblood's calm, detailed account, backed by what he said were witnesses and phone records. He described being invited into Bishop Jakes' home after an emotional conversation that had stretched across a long dining table. Jakes, he said, had wept with him, listened intently to stories of his difficult upbringing, and created what felt like a sacred space of mutual understanding. It was, in Youngblood's words, the first time he had felt seen by another man. But that moment of shared humanity, he claimed, suddenly shifted. As he rose to leave, Jakes allegedly stood in his path, embraced him tightly, and tried to kiss him. The shock of that moment, Youngblood recalled, shattered him. He couldn't remember how he got out of the house, only that the spell had broken. And the trauma didn't end there. According to Youngblood, Jakes later called him during a trip, speaking from a bathtub and laying out 3 chilling demands: that Youngblood be the only one he slept with during his visit, that Youngblood refrain from sleeping with anyone else to protect Jakes's wife, and that in return, he would be financially cared for forever. The young minister, horrified and confused, decided not to attend church that evening. But when his mother insisted, reminding him of their family's rule that church attendance wasn't optional, he went. What happened next only deepened the wound. That night, in front of the entire congregation, Bishop Jakes called him up to read scripture before the sermon, putting him on display despite the storm of emotions he was silently carrying. Youngblood was not alone in raising concerns. A number of longtime Potter's House members reportedly noticed Jakes's strange behavior around that same time. Whispers in the congregation hinted that something had changed, not just in the bishop's health, but in his spirit. Even more damaging were the mounting rumors about his regular presence at Diddy's infamous FreakOFF parties, wild, no-holds-barred gatherings that seemed a world away from scripture and sermons. Several individuals close to both Diddy and Jakes claimed the bishop was no stranger to those rooms, those nights, or those secrets. And so, while Bishop Jakes battled accusations in the courtroom and struggled for his life in a hospital bed, another war raged, one of image, memory, and betrayal. The accusations from Youngblood didn't just challenge his reputation, they cracked the foundation of trust beneath his entire ministry. And with federal investigators now watching closely, the question was no longer just whether Jakes would survive the fallout, but whether the truth, however long buried, was finally clawing its way into the light. Shadows behind the pulpit. But as that controversy simmered, another layer unraveled, one laced with whispered alliances, questionable appearances, and a connection that raised more than a few eyebrows, especially when it came to the unlikely bond between music mogul Sean "Diddy" Combs and the man once hailed as one of America's most influential pastors, Bishop T.D. Jakes. In a startling interview, Diddy's former head of security, Gene Deal, didn't hold back. He painted a picture of a carefully constructed public image, a strategy that, according to him, involved enlisting the credibility of Bishop Jakes to shield Diddy's reputation. "That's why T.D. Jakes was there," Gene said, "to clean up his image." He didn't sugarcoat it either. He spoke of a man who knew exactly what he was doing, who understood the power that came with being associated with one of the most revered church leaders in the country. "Ain't no money like church money," Gene added, suggesting that the pastor's presence wasn't just spiritual, it was strategic. The accusations didn't stop there. Gene recalled frequent scenes of chaos, of Diddy handing out firearms like party favors, of a violent atmosphere lurking beneath the glamour. These weren't baseless assumptions, they were the recollections of a man who stood watch at the door, who knew what kind of energy filled the rooms where Diddy's fame met private excess. Meanwhile, the Potter's House, a megachurch in Dallas that brought in millions and had become Jakes's spiritual empire, was beginning to feel the weight of its leaders' associations. When legal trouble started closing in, Jakes reportedly began stepping back, handing over control in subtle ways, perhaps to distance his empire from the waves crashing in around him. By early 2024, the scandals had multiplied. The arrest of Richard Brandon Coleman, the ex-husband of Jakes's daughter, for child molestation in 2022 had already rattled the foundations. Now, with lawsuits for sexual assault pressing in on the bishop himself, the timing couldn't have been worse. Gene Deal wasn't the only one speaking out. Many within the faith community, and even some outside it, struggled to reconcile the image of Jakes, the preacher who stood before thousands, preaching hope and salvation, with the man allegedly frequenting Diddy's notorious parties, environments often described as playgrounds for unrestrained indulgence. Some defended Jakes, suggesting maybe he went there to minister, to bring light into dark places. Others weren't so sure. "It just doesn't sit right," said one critic. "When you grew up in church, you were taught the saints and the sinners didn't mix like that. You knew where the line was." These weren't just wild parties, they were gatherings said to involve drinking, harmful substances, sex of every kind, and power games that blurred every moral boundary. Regular appearances, familiarity, proximity that didn't quite make sense, and above all, the unspoken truth. When a man of the cloth willingly enters circles of chaos, people start wondering if he's there to heal the broken, or if he's simply comfortable in the chaos. For many believers, the image of Bishop Jakes at Diddy's parties wasn't just confusing. It was painful. It muddied the line between spiritual authority and celebrity culture, between sanctity and spectacle. It wasn't just about guilt or innocence anymore. It was about trust, about the quiet shattering of a pedestal built over decades. And as whispers turned to headlines and accusations turned into court filings, the trust was becoming harder to hold on to. But what do you think drove members of Diddy's once loyal inner circle to suddenly distance themselves? Was it fear, guilt, or something far more explosive? Let's find out. The exodus from Diddy's circle. As the storm around Diddy thickened, another wave of departures signaled a dramatic unraveling that could no longer be ignored. It wasn't just Bishop T.D. Jakes quietly distancing himself. Hollywood heavyweights like Will Smith and Ellen DeGeneres, along with Diddy's own long-standing legal team, were rapidly backing away from the embattled mogul. Even the elite law firm Grubman, Shire, Meiselas and Sachs, known for representing industry titans like Madonna, Usher, Bruce Springsteen, and Lady Gaga, formally cut ties after over 2 decades of partnership. The departure was so abrupt and unusual that it sparked a swirl of speculation, including claims that Lady Gaga herself had reportedly issued an ultimatum: drop Diddy or lose her as a client. For a firm founded by Alan Grubman, so entrenched in the entertainment world that he helped establish the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in the 1980s, this was not just a legal decision, but a calculated distancing from what had become a reputational minefield. On February 21, 2024, one of Diddy's attorneys, Anthony Rico, filed a motion to withdraw from the case. Though bound by professional discretion, Rico cited reasons tied to ethical constraints, stating that he could no longer serve as legal counsel while remaining consistent with the American Bar Association's standards. He left the details vague, invoking attorney-client privilege, but the message was unmistakable. Something within the case had crossed a line even seasoned criminal defense lawyers weren't willing to straddle. As Diddy's inner circle shrank, his legal defenses took on a new tone, one that appeared to mimic strategies often reserved for defendants with no other lifeline. According to court documents filed on April 27th, Diddy's legal team argued that his mental capacity had been impaired at the time of the alleged crimes due to chronic drug and alcohol use. It was a plea for diminished responsibility, hinting that perhaps the man once seen as a master of empire building was not fully in control of his actions. The prosecution, however, quickly moved to block this strategy. They asked the judge to dismiss any psychiatric testimony suggesting Diddy lacked the awareness or intent necessary to be held accountable, arguing that such a defense undermined the volume and consistency of the victims' testimonies. Prosecutors had already secured the judge's approval to include critical evidence, like the 2016 surveillance video of Diddy violently grabbing Cassie Ventura in a hotel hallway, despite objections from the defense. That footage, previously buried, now loomed large as a symbol of a pattern long hidden from public view. Yet the case grew more complicated as the credibility of the victims was openly challenged by the defense. Many of the women had maintained relationships with Diddy even after the alleged incidents occurred, a fact the defense hoped to exploit in front of a jury. But experts pointed out that this pattern is not uncommon in cases involving power dynamics and abuse. Victims often remain in contact with their abusers out of fear, professional necessity, or financial survival. "What do you do when your boss crosses a line?" one analyst asked. "Quit and starve?" This rhetorical question encapsulated the dilemma many accusers faced, and it's why prosecutors are searching for what they call outcry witnesses, people who were confided in years ago when the incidents first happened. These witnesses lend credibility to claims that otherwise might seem diluted by time or continued association. Even more troubling for Diddy, it was revealed that a second superseding indictment had been filed, adding fresh charges to an already swollen case. And while a plea deal had reportedly been offered just weeks earlier, Diddy turned it down, possibly believing that his legacy and resources could still weather the storm. But with each passing day, the foundation beneath him appeared to erode. The people who once sang his praises, stood beside him in courtrooms, or defended him in boardrooms were now slipping away one by one. The tapes, the trial, and the tension behind the curtain. What started as a slow unraveling of professional ties and legal alliances has now erupted into something far more explosive: shocking footage, disputed evidence, and growing unease around the looming trial of Sean "Diddy" Combs. Whispers had circulated for months, but it wasn't until federal agents raided Combs's mansion in November 2024 that the allegations took on a whole new weight. Among the evidence reportedly seized were tapes, explicit, damning, and deeply controversial. These recordings allegedly show prominent religious leader Bishop T.D. Jakes in compromising situations with men at private parties hosted by Combs himself. While the tapes have not been made public, their existence has sent ripples through both the entertainment world and religious communities, shaking the image of a man who was once seen as a spiritual guide to celebrities. What makes this even more peculiar is the nature of Jakes's involvement. His presence at Diddy's notorious gatherings had always raised eyebrows, especially since most spiritual advisors are rarely seen dancing in the same circles as their clients. People who've worked closely with religious leaders for decades have noted that never once had a reverend or preacher shown up at their parties. But here was Jakes, photographed and allegedly caught on camera in settings far removed from Sunday sermons. Combs, now desperate to keep the tapes out of the courtroom, has argued that the FBI had no legal authority to search his residence in the first place. His legal team has pushed to suppress the footage entirely, citing violations of his rights and claiming procedural missteps. But these attempts appear increasingly frantic as more and more is revealed about the scope of the case. The breadth of allegations spans continents, naming unnamed individuals and co-conspirators in jurisdictions far outside the U.S. Some of the key witnesses who could have added clarity to the case are now deceased, raising serious questions about how their testimony, or lack thereof, will affect the defense. In a tightly worded court filing, Combs's attorneys noted that they were barred from sharing the identities of certain individuals listed in the government's disclosure letter until April 18th. This restriction, they argue, has handcuffed their ability to build an effective defense, especially when facing a mountain of new claims. And the pressure is only mounting. Just last month, prosecutors dropped a second superseding indictment on April 4th, expanding the list of charges and complicating an already chaotic legal battlefield. With jury selection set for May 5th, Diddy's lawyers attempted to delay the proceedings, asking for a 2-month extension to prepare. But Judge Subramanian was unconvinced. Despite 4 different law firms now representing Combs, the judge denied the motion, making it clear that the trial would move forward as planned. This tight timeline has only heightened tensions in the courtroom. On the one hand, the prosecution has requested that alleged victims be allowed to testify under pseudonyms to protect their identities, something the judge approved. But in a surprising move, one key witness, Combs's former girlfriend Cassie Ventura, has agreed to testify under her real name. Cassie's civil lawsuit against Combs was settled quickly, but her role in this criminal trial could be pivotal. Adding another twist, the defense requested access to behind-the-scenes footage from a Warner Brothers documentary that included interviews with several potential witnesses. The judge approved the request, giving the defense another layer to scrutinize. But time is running out. In court last Friday, Combs, dressed in a muted beige jail uniform, was allowed a brief exchange with his mother and son, telling them, "I love you and we're good." He maintains his innocence, pleading not guilty to all 5 federal charges. His lead attorney, Mark Agnifilo, has made it clear that race will be a key element in their defense strategy. Standing before the judge, Agnifilo emphasized that in his view, the case represents yet another attempt by the government to tear down a successful black entrepreneur. He pointed to Combs's legacy, building billion-dollar businesses, creating opportunities, and changing the music industry, as proof that this prosecution may be driven by more than just legal motives. The optics of the legal team haven't gone unnoticed either. Agnifilo is white, as are co-counsel Tenny Garagos and her father, the high-profile attorney Mark Garagos, who is expected to play a significant role as the trial unfolds. Critics argue that a legal team lacking racial diversity may not sit well with a jury expected to hear emotional testimony from black female victims. The visual dynamic alone could sway public perception, potentially making it appear as though a wealthy black man is being shielded by high-powered white attorneys, while his accusers, largely black women, fight to be believed. With courtrooms poised to turn into battlegrounds, and with both media and the public watching every move, the atmosphere around this case has grown heavier with each passing day. While the defense stirred quiet controversy, what happened next shook everything. Let's find out what comes next. Silent deals and shifting loyalties. And just as whispers turned into full-blown firestorms, the courtroom drama took a new twist when it was revealed that federal prosecutors had quietly extended a plea deal to Diddy. A deal allegedly contingent on him giving up names of those who helped orchestrate his now infamous FreakOFF gatherings. The offer came with heavy implications. Spare yourself by exposing others. But Diddy, steadfast in his public innocence, reportedly turned it down. His rejection wasn't surprising, but what followed certainly raised eyebrows. Just one day after that deal was floated, Bishop T.D. Jakes suddenly resigned from his pastoral duties, sending shockwaves through his congregation and the wider public alike. The timing was too precise, too connected for many to ignore. Questions began swirling. Was Jakes implicated? Had the deal named names that sent shockwaves into the pulpit? Meanwhile, inside the courtroom, tensions were mounting. Diddy arrived, looking more subdued than ever, pen in hand, prepared to take notes. But something was clearly off. When he turned around to scan the gallery, expecting to see the familiar faces of family and close supporters, none were there. The absence hit hard. Only later did his son Justin quietly slip into the back row, exchanging a solemn nod with his father, a silent message of support in an increasingly isolating battle. But the real bombshells weren't in body language. They were in video evidence. Prosecutors confirmed that jurors would soon watch the controversial hotel surveillance footage of Diddy and his former partner, Cassie Ventura. Though the original recording was destroyed, a mobile phone copy survived, one now poised to become a centerpiece of the prosecution's case. The person who captured that clip is expected to testify, alongside experts, to verify its authenticity. Jurors won't just be seeing a grainy recording, they'll be witnessing what federal investigators argue is a pivotal moment, one that kicked off the wave of lawsuits and allegations that followed. Adding more fuel to the case, federal prosecutors announced that video footage from the alleged FreakOFF parties would also be introduced. These aren't just salacious clips. They're said to include scenes involving high-profile figures and controversial conduct, some of which may be directly linked to the power players once thought untouchable. The inclusion of this material makes jury selection critical. How do you find 12 unbiased citizens when the trial involves celebrity, sex, violence, and religion all crashing together? At the center of it all is Cassie, no longer just a footnote or anonymous Jane Doe, but the primary voice against the man she once called her partner. Rolling Stone confirmed she is victim number 1 in the case, a status that carries more weight given her public persona and history with Diddy. Cassie's decision to testify under her real name is a powerful one. Unlike the other 3 alleged victims, who will remain anonymous for their protection, Cassie has stepped into the spotlight, ready to look Diddy in the eyes and recount her experience. Her testimony is expected to be both emotional and devastating, as she details moments when she claims she was manipulated, coerced, and physically harmed. It was that leaked video of Diddy allegedly striking her in a hotel room that first cracked the facade. But now, with her testifying in open court, the stakes have risen. And because Cassie isn't just any accuser, she's a former public darling with a recognizable name and face, the impact of her words could echo far beyond the courtroom. Millennials remember her as a rising star, someone who once lit up stages and red carpets. Now she's stepping into a different kind of spotlight, one that could redefine public perception of Diddy entirely. And then, almost unspoken but eerily present, is the growing speculation around T.D. Jakes. What exactly tied him so closely to Diddy? Why, as a man of faith, was he reportedly present at private events described by insiders as anything but holy? Party footage reportedly recovered during the federal raid is said to include moments showing unexpected guests, including Jakes himself. Sources close to the case suggest that authorities are combing through hours of video to determine the full extent of his involvement. His sudden resignation, once viewed as unrelated, now appears to many as a preemptive retreat from a storm he may have seen coming. The idea that a spiritual leader might have been a willing participant, or at the very least, a bystander, in such events is rocking communities of faith and prompting deeper questions about the blurred lines between fame, power, and morality. The final unraveling. And as the courtroom prepared for one of the most high-profile celebrity trials in recent memory, a deeper, more unsettling narrative began to take shape, one that stretched far beyond Diddy's empire and into the pulpit of America's spiritual elite. The arrest of Sean Diddy Combs in September 2024, on federal charges including racketeering and trafficking, shocked the public. But what truly cracked the surface was the unexpected appearance of Bishop T.D. Jakes' name in one of the lawsuits. For years, Jakes was known as a revered faith leader, bridging church and culture, respected even by Hollywood royalty. But now, questions swirled around how such a respected figure could find himself in the same sentence as a man accused of orchestrating coercive, drug-fueled FreakOFF parties. The controversy intensified when a resurfaced video showed Jakes briefly attending Diddy's 53rd birthday celebration in Los Angeles in 2022. Though his team insisted it was a short business visit and denied any improper involvement, social media erupted. Critics pointed out that aligning oneself with a figure like Diddy, especially amid long-standing rumors, was, at best, poor judgment. Others weren't so forgiving. After Cassie Ventura's explosive November 2023 lawsuit alleging a decade of abuse, Diddy's reputation spiraled, and Jakes quickly distanced himself. But whispers continued. Had Diddy leaned on his friendship with the bishop to clean his public image? A producer close to the situation alleged just that. As online speculation deepened, some began to believe Jakes' sudden resignation in early 2025 was no coincidence, especially after the federal plea deal dangled in front of Diddy reportedly implicated others in his inner circle. But what do you think really triggered TD Jakes' sudden resignation? Coincidence, or was his name buried deep in the footage Diddy refused to trade? We'd like to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe.